Okay, as Chair Quam gets settled in, I move that HF 1447 before the committee, and this is meant to be laid over. Chair Quam, if you want to speak of your bill and the DE1 amendment.
Thank you. And the basic premise behind this bill is to try to have some information. Oftentimes, I hear people saying that there's outside groups, outside entities that are getting involved. And so someone came and said, we'd like to have some transparency to see where this money's coming from. And so that was the intent of the bill. And I believe that I'm going to move, there it is, the DE1 amendment to get the bill in the form that the author would prefer.
Thank you. All those in favor? Oh, sorry. Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know this committee has a 24-hour rule. I see the timestamp on this of 5:22 p.m. yesterday. I mean, I understand it's a technical amendment, so I'm not going to raise a big stink, but I just thought I'd get it on the record, and at some point, if we want to do something similar on this side, you've been very accommodating so far, so hopefully we could be as well.
Chair Quam.
Thank you, Representative Freiberg. Yeah, what happened is there were discussions some hours before this that something was discovered for technical correction and a cleanup. And so that's why we performed this DE. And it's been nice that, this committee, at least so far, we work together pretty good. And we understand that, things happen. And I appreciate your agreeing to the reasonableness of getting it in the format which the author would prefer.
All right. Oh, Representative Freiberg.
A related question, which I just thought of, since this is a DE amendment, I know our side had a few amendments to offer as well. Will those amendments be in order to the DE?
Matt Gehring, would you speak to that?
Madam Chair, Representative Freiberg, the amendments that are drafted for your caucus currently are not drafted to the DE1 amendment, so the page and line references are incorrect, but I've been in consultation with some of your members about how to update them with oral amendments to make them fit the bill.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Good. Okay, thank you. Thank you for bringing that up, Representative Freiberg. And so then with that, we'll all in favor of adopting the DE1 authors amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, and then we'll move on. I think there's some amendments. Or Quam, sorry, Chair Quam, do you want to speak to the bill first?
Well, first I want to say, since this is being laid over for possible inclusion, a lot of the technical or nitty-gritty things can be, worked out, especially if we discuss the intent of the amendments, so that, if something on the fly is not landing quite, technically correct, I don't have a problem with sitting down and trying working this out. Again, this was meant to provide for more transparency. Oftentimes, there may not be any issue out there, but if there's not transparency, people wonder. And you often get discussions and things that, call to question our process. And the more light we can shine on with maintaining reasonable privacy, I think helps to avoid misconceptions, misunderstandings, and arguments over things that really aren't there. I look forward to hearing and discussing the amendments.
Thank you, Chair Quam. And then we'll move forward with amendments. I believe Representative Lee, did you want to go first with yours?
Sure, I can move the A1. So I think because we've adopted the DE one, then I don't know if it makes sense to do a verbal amendment on this or to just note that the line reference on line 1.2 should not be line 21, it should be line 10.
Let's go to Matt Gearing.
Madam Chair, that's correct. So the technical correction here is line 1.2. The page and line reference should be page 4, line 10 to match the DE one.
Great, so I know we adopted the DE and we didn't quite go through how the DE is different from the bill, but this amendment simply would add an appropriation to the bill to make sure that the enforcing agency of this bill would get adequate funding for any staff work or any, systems that the CFB might require. Like the author mentioned earlier, this is a problem for, both sides of the aisle. We want to make sure that voters and residents across Minnesota, continue to believe in the integrity of the system. And so, I think for us, this is a good start. I think we'd want to work on this in a bipartisan way, but we also just want to make sure that the work that's done is actually funded. So that's what this amendment does.
Chair Quam.
No, I understand the intent, and there's not I haven't seen any fiscal note coming back yet. When I look at the newest software that's been utilized for the treasurers, where they're entering the information for all contributions, that it's going into a database, and at Motorola, when I managed metrology area, I also did some database query generations. So having the database and the software set up the way it is, it would take very little time to be able to generate a query. I used to do that in probably about an hour or two for a much more complex set of databases. So I'm not sure it would need much additional outside work to do that, because I really enjoy the improvement they've done. I think it was just this year they rolled out that new software, so even an elected official could run it.
Thank you. And Representative Freiberg, you had a question?
Yeah, I see Mr. Sigurdsson in the audience here. I'm wondering if he could just come up to the table. I did reach out to him prior to this, just knowing this bill was coming up. I'm not sure if the DE changes anything for it, but at least the bill as originally introduced would require legislative candidates to report right now we only have to report people who give more than $200 regardless of where they live. This would require them to report contributions in any amount if they are outside of the legislative district. I have a treasurer for my campaign. Sometimes he enters the data, sometimes I do it, so I'm fairly familiar with how it works. And there's not a space in there for putting in the software for putting in which legislative district a person lives in. And it can be pretty complicated. Like there's, in my district, there's some mid-block legislative boundary differences and so forth. And I know Representative Greenman has an amendment coming up that I think is going to get at this issue as well. But I guess I'm just wondering, would there be a cost to the Campaign Finance Board to do this? Perhaps Mr. Sigurdsson could speak to that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Sigurdsson, for joining us. And if you could state your name.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jeff Sigurdsson with the Campaign Finance and Public Disclosure Board. I appreciate the question. It really depends on the expectation of the legislature. If the data entry screen could have as little as a modification where the treasurer, whoever is doing the data entry, would indicate whether the individual or association was located within the district. But if there was a concern that that wasn't sufficient, then there could be also a linking of the application to, for example, the LCC has on the legislative page a place where you can put in your address and then it'll tell you which district you reside in. To have a background check on all addresses to determine the amount of disclosure required on the report, Frankly, the fiscal note I got on Friday, I would want to talk to my IT staff on that. I'm assuming it would not be real significant, but there would be a complication there if the expectation is that again, the CFRO application is deciding whether or not the person resides within the district.
Thank you. Representative Freiberg?
Thank you. Yeah, I just think there'd be a smaller likelihood of human error if it were able to cross-check with the GIS information that the House has, just because of, not every treasurer is gonna, or even candidate for that matter, is gonna know where the district boundaries are in every instance. So, I mean, I understand the goal. I think it would be better if there were potentially an appropriation there to account for a cost, and I think it would be better if it were done in a way that there was some greater certainty on it, and I see Chair Quam has his hand
Chair
raised,
Quam?
too.
Thank you. My treasurer passed away this past year.
Sorry to hear that.
And so I became familiar with the data entry software being utilized. And in fact, all contributions are entered into that system. So there wouldn't be, we'd have to add additional. So the only query would be generating a script that went through the contributions and would have the activity of taking the information in the address cell and running a script to be able to verify what district that was in. Again, that's the type of thing that, 20 years ago, I would have done in maybe an hour or two, because, and with the systems we've got now, it's pretty easy to generate. So I'm not anticipating there being a big issue, especially since we've got more than one site that's within our state government system for locating addresses versus, the district.
Thank you. And Representative Lee? Representative Lee, if you want to close.
Yeah, so I'll just close. But before I do that, I guess I wanted to note that, this committee gave the CFB money to develop this new software. And so, it's my understanding that when you modify these things, we have to pay more money to a contractor to modify it. And so I'm just curious if a fiscal note has been requested, or, if we can answer that
Chair Quorum.
question.
My understanding of the fiscal note has been requested, and my understanding is if you've got access to the database, you wouldn't have to touch the software that is entering the information into the database. You would be generating a query in that database for that. You'd have to also maybe have a script to be able to take, extract the address, ping over here, and you'd get it's equal to or not equal to. It's not a complex thing. So you wouldn't have to modify. You could do a modification so that you'd already have that done so there's another field in the database, but that wouldn't be required. At least that's how, my background indicates the ease at which you could perform this activity.
Representative Lee?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, but if I'm reading the DE correctly, we're asking for this new report, and so somebody at the CFB or a contractor would have to make this change, right, to show this new data on the reports that candidates file. Is that consistent with what
Chair
the
Quorum.
understanding of the bill is for the author?
Yeah, once you generate the script, and if you're going to generate a report, you would add those few lines onto that report script, and boom, it'll pop out the report with that added on.
Okay. All right, thank you. Representative Lee, you still had another question?
Yes, so I'd like a roll call on this, and also just to point out, I don't think there is staff at the CFP to write the script, so we have to pay someone to do it. And that's why I'm requesting a roll call on this. Thanks.
All right, thank you. With that, there's a roll call that's been made. Okay. And then all of those, okay, I'm sorry, you can do the roll.
Chair Quam.
No.
Vice Chair Altendorf.
No.
Representative Acomb.
Yes.
Representative Coulter.
Aye.
Representative Davis.
No.
Representative Gordon.
No.
Representative Greenman.
Aye.
Representative Lee.
Aye.
Representative McDonald. Representative Roach. Representative Vernig.
Yes.
All right, there's 6 noes and 5 yeses. The amendment does not pass. Representative Greenman?
Thank you, Chair Altendorf. And I just mentioned, I have one of those amendments that sort of, we can accomplish what we intend with the A3, but there is a line item because we now have the DE. So if, maybe I could have Matt Gearing explain how to accomplish this with the current bill in front of us, the DE.
Yep, and we'll
And then I can
hand it over
explain
to,
what it
yep,
is.
Gearing.
Madam Chair and members, so to accomplish the concepts that are reflected in the A3 amendment in what is now the DE1 amendment, what I would suggest is an oral amendment on line 1.21 of the DE1 to delete delete the phrase "area to be represented by the candidate" and insert "state." So the effect of this change would be that the principal campaign committee that's reporting this additional information would only be required to do so if the individual does not reside in or the association is not located in the state.
All right, Representative Greenman.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. This is a simple amendment. I actually share the value of both transparency. I think when we think about, and if the concern, which I think was expressed, is out-of-state contributions, what we're talking about is small dollar contributions at this point, under $200. Anything over $200 already has to be disclosed. My concern with the language is just, and we've talked a lot about this, Minnesota has proudly has a part-time legislature. We have campaigns that in other states, people spend tens of thousands of dollars at Congress, I think probably hundreds of thousands of dollars on compliance, paying treasurers, all of that stuff. In Minnesota, it sounds like both our chair and our lead may do some of their own treasuring themselves. And so making sure that we have a system that works for folks. My neighbor is my treasurer. She's an accountant, but she's never done anything in politics before. So she knows how to keep track of the in and out, but doesn't spend a lot of time looking at the district lines. I'll say this is after redistricting. I have a few folks who are giving contributions of like $5 a month, and they were in my district until 2022, and then would no longer be in the district because the lines moved, in this case, 1 block. And so I think not everyone is blessed to have the experience with both technology and systems that you do, Representative Quam. What this would do is say, and I think it would be administrable by our treasurers, because it's very easy for a treasurer to look and say, this is a contribution from a $5 or $10 or $40 contribution from California or from Texas or wherever. It's much harder to be able to say, okay, I need to pull up a map where I can see block by block, does the district cut off here? Maybe advocates from your city or your county that may be divided are going to give you resources. Maybe just somebody who likes you, who saw you on a Planned Parenthood or an Action for Liberty, one of those two things, lots of other groups, but maybe they saw you at a presentation and they wanted to give you $5 or $10. A treasurer who is a volunteer, who's already taking the couple hours a week to enter in information, it is a huge burden to have them look up individually. I think if we wanted to do this, we should do what Representative Lee, I think, was alluding to, which is we should make sure that there is a tool on the Campaign Finance Board website that does what you said, which is makes it easy for the treasurer, but that obviously would have a different cost. And so what this would do is say, if our concern is we want to make sure that campaigns are fueled by small donors in our communities and in our state, a state line is a much easier administrable line, and that's all my amendment does. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and we'll go to Chair Quam.
My understanding is that because of the deleting of for legislative and statewide candidates, there is some definition or confusion in with that change. And I just heard about that today. I have no problem with trying to, we're laying it over possible inclusion. I have no problem with trying to make sure we get the verbiage right and making sure that this is part of our discussion if the, it gets included in a bill.
Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Chair Altendorf. And I think this is the challenge with, if you look at the new language, it actually doesn't impact the legislative or statewide candidates because I think you're redrafting. The only change it makes is instead of saying that what we're looking at is whether or not you live in the district, what we're looking at is whether or not you are a contributor from outside the state. For our statewide candidates, frankly, that wouldn't matter because everybody in the state is in their district. But for legislative candidates like us who have part-time, frankly, volunteer treasurers, all this does is say, instead of saying we're gonna have to have our treasurers look up where the lines are, what they can do is say, is this a contribution made outside the state? And if so, down to the cent, it should be recorded, and if it's a contribution made in the state, we would keep the current rules.
Nothing? Okay. With that, yep, this was a new oral amendment, and with that, all in favor of adopting that, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? No. Nay. The amendment does not pass. Just, wait. Do we have one more amendment, or? No?
Madam Chair, I believe that the amendment was made redundant by the DE.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Is there any further discussion on the bill? Representative Freiberg.
That's fine. One thing I just thought of, but didn't really, I know the bill is being laid over, so maybe this is something you can think about as it moves forward, but this would expand the list of people whose names and addresses are getting disclosed. There's a lot of people who make contributions right now, some frankly who may make a, in the amount of $199 just because they don't want their address disclosed. And I mean, there could be reasons you want to disclose those, like if they work for a company with, with business before your committee or something like that. But there are situations though where they might be part of the Safe at Home program. They might be, have a restraining order. They might be concerned about stalking or something along those lines. And I think there may be situations where we want to preserve the option of people not disclosing their address. Have you thought about that issue, Chair Quam, or is that something you're interested in looking at as this moves, if this comes forward at a later stage after being laid over?
Chair Quam.
there are, Secretary of State has, part of the activities is to prevent the address of, somebody who is, needs to have it not public. That's already shielded through activities. My intent is to have it, just so you know how much is coming from out of state, out of district, that type of thing. I'm fine with not having the names visible. And if we want to, in the final language, so the report, all it will come out with saying is, for this House district, contribution to this candidate, 80% were in district and 20% were out of district. I mean, I'm fine with that because, again, this came from people wondering if somebody was messing around because all this money flowed in there. And to me, if you feel it's good to have transparency, just knowing that this amount came from, and what we could do is also add adjoining districts. I'm in my 3rd district. So if it's from people that you used to be, so anything that was adjoining you probably would include any past districts we can do that kind of tweak because it's being laid over, and we can come up with a reasonable bill, because that's what we're here to do as a committee.
All right.
So I understand your intent, and I will work on, if this is possibly included, to address in a reasonable fashion.
Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, appreciate that.
All right, and with that, HF 1447 will be laid over as amended for possible inclusion.